welcome everybody. I can see there's still a few more to join us, but I'd like to get going because, as always, we have so much to talk about and I don't want to run out of time. So I would like to start by acknowledging country and acknowledge the beautiful Central Coast area that I'm in, the saltwater country, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and recognise that this country was never ceded. I also acknowledge all the different countries that you are zooming in from today. And welcome to our final webinar of the series. And it's great to have our participants with us, our panellists here. We do have one more who hasn't quite arrived yet, so hopefully Paul Donnelly will be able to join us. But we have Emma Webster, we have Antonia Mocatta, and we have Sarah Liebetrau. And I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves, tell us where they're from within the university and whatever else they want to share with us, and perhaps just tell us what drew them, because they've all done the CCLP in the past, and what drew you to do the CCLP. We can start with you, Emma.
Iridu marang, yuandu ima, nadu banigugu bara waradjuri, mangalang nangu, norabanga ninha nankira darinyagai, mandangu. So my name's Emma. I'm a senior lecturer in rural research at the School of Rural Health in Dubbo, based in Dubbo. And I've just used the language of the Wiradjuri people to acknowledge the special country that I'm on today, which is Tabaga Wiradjuri country. And I'd also like to extend that to all the countries that you're from, and pay my respects to people from all nations who are joining as part of this meeting today. Your question about what did I hope to get out of doing the CCLP, and I guess for me it was about questioning the colonial fantasy, I guess, and trying to figure out a way to step outside of that and walk alongside and be an ally for Aboriginal colleagues and students and community members and friends, and just trying to figure out as a non-Aboriginal person, what could my role be? How do I change that? What do I do? And I think I found that as being part of the CCLP.
Thank you, Emma. Thanks for that. Antonia, would you like to go next?
What a wonderful acknowledgement. Thank you, Emma. My name is Antonia Mocatta, and I'm the Director of Central Services at the University of Sydney Library. And today I'm in Fisher Libraries, so I'm on Gadigal land, and I've been working over the past few months between here and home, which is Wongal land, just over the border of Missenden Road, also in Camperdown. I believe that the borders were permeable in terms of which clans were where, so I split my time between Gadigal and Wongal country, and I would like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, and to acknowledge the custodianship forever embedded within the knowledge of country. And to me, the reasons why I undertook this program in the first place, I have always had an interest broadly in culture, having lived on 4 continents during my life. And during my formative years, I spent much of my time outside of Australia, so I almost felt that there was a gap in my cultural knowledge in relation to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures. So I was hungry to learn more, but also very much aware of being in the library environment and wanting to be of the best service we can to our clients. And one of the things that I wanted to refocus on the library's strategic program in relation to diversity and inclusion was how we could make the library a more cultural safe space, and how we could enhance our practices within the library to better align with cultural competence. So the program has very much given me that, and I think as we'll discuss later on today, we've been able to, as a result of a number of senior leaders within the library having undertaken the program, we've really been able to progress cultural competence within the libraries more broadly at the university. So looking forward to sharing some of that with you.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to hearing about it, but sharing it with everybody else, because there's been amazing things coming out of the library. So thank you for that. Sarah.
Hi everyone, thanks Gabrielle. I'm Head of Internal Communications in the Marketing and Communications portfolio, and I've been at the university for about 3 years. So a few things drew me to the program. I suppose for me, it's a lifelong learning experience and a lifelong journey in terms of broadening my own knowledge and awareness of a variety of experiences and people other than my own. In particular, I really wanted to learn more about our First Nations people as an essential part of anything that I do or think of in terms of diversity and inclusion, as the traditional custodians of the land that I live on, which is Wallumbeggle land, by the way. That's where I am at the moment. I just feel that it's not really something for me that's just a nice to have. To me, it's just an essential thing if I want to be a compassionate thinking and, you know, full member of society. And as a person, I just feel like it's really important to have as much understanding as possible. And it's just not possible to get that through just reading and talking to, you know, people that I know or in my own circle. It requires commitment and focus and the time out from your daily life, and to actually hear from Aboriginal people in their place and about their experiences. I just don't think that's an irreplaceable opportunity and such a privilege that I just was really excited to participate in.
Thank you. And before I forget, I'd just like to invite the people watching to put any questions that you have in the chat or the Q&A. I'll keep an eye on those, and we'll do some as we go, and also at the end we can always answer some questions. So my next question is really about a small question. What did you get out of doing the CCLP?
You know, actually just physically participating in the knowledge of the local area, being guided by Aboriginal guides in terms of the vegetation and the way they relate to the land. So going through the sand dunes and the middens and hearing all the stories, you know, that oral tradition really came alive for me in a way that it doesn't if you're, like I said earlier, just reading it in a book or talking to someone for secondhand. The stories from the elders about their own personal experiences of being part of the stolen generation were just so moving. And again, like there wasn't anything that I didn't theoretically know about, but hearing it and being there and hearing the stories, not just the terrible things, but the triumphs and the knowledge and the connection to the land. I think it was very emotional because it wasn't just sadness or just celebration. It was just a combination of all those things. And I think an experience like that really does stay with you, and it's not an effort to have to remember what happened. It's an emotion that you come away with that helps you and encourages you to keep wanting to learn more and to keep doing more as part of your daily life.
Thanks, Sarah. That's great. I see Paul's joined us, but I'll come back to you, Paul, in a minute to introduce you. We'll just go to the others so that you can settle in and hear where we're at. Antonia, how about you?
Some of the takeaways from the program, or what stayed with me, I think in particular, I have found that my awareness of the lens, the cultural lens through which I see the world, is much more foregrounded in my thinking now. And I do often sort of stop myself and recognize the cultural background that I bring to a particular perspective. And I've begun to sort of practice trying to see things in other ways as a result of the theory in the program. But beyond that, the experience of being on country and meeting with, in particular, the stolen generation, the members of the stolen generation who presented at Muruk, I think just made the history that I knew theoretically that much more real. I concur with what Sarah was just saying in that regard, and really to feel the raw emotion and the hurt that it's caused was just shocking through hearing that and the broken journey. And then also, I think I've gained a deeper understanding of what connection to country means and what it's really all about, and have appreciated how that's played out through Aboriginal oral traditions, and just the sensational importance really of custodianship of country, and how that's meant that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have lived on these lands for 60,000 years in a sustainable way. It's absolutely fascinating to hear about their deep knowledge of the environment, the plants and water. And I have a moment that I might just share with you actually when we were down at Murrumarang. For those of you who went to the earlier program, you might remember on the afternoon that you were taken out on the walk, there was an opportunity to sit down on the cliffs and to imagine the environment and the people as we looked out to see, you know, the sounds of children playing and women collecting shellfish and the men out fishing. And we were all meant to be closing our eyes and imagining this scene, and the conversation was really about that connection to country and the way that people lived in harmony with the environment. But I opened my eyes just at the very moment that a whale leapt out of the ocean, just 50 meters offshore to where we were sitting, and that sort of just was such a wonderful coincidence that sort of completed the picture in that circumstance. And it was something, I think that's something that will really stay with me forever.
What a beautiful experience. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. And it was no coincidence that you opened your eyes at that moment. That was how it was meant to be. Thank you. Emma, how about you?
Well, I did the UN Country in 2018 leadership program, and I think that in addition to the things that Sarah and Antonia mentioned, because they certainly ring true with my own personal experience, but it was also about bringing like-minded people together. And everyone being prepared to sort of question truths and be open to new ways and new perspectives. And I think it was that chance to really talk about some of the things that you think about, but are never really brave enough to talk about. And it felt like a very safe space to start to consider and unpick some of those ideas and learn more about yourself as you were, even having that opportunity to talk about your, the things that you were thinking about and feeling uncomfortable about, I guess. So it was a very safe space, and I think that was the thing that stayed with me, is that sense of, companionship on this journey and safety.
Thank you so much. And Paul, coming in from F21 Level 4 meeting room, are you able to turn your camera on, and can you hear us? Is probably the bigger question I should ask you. Paul, are you there? Okay, I'm not sure. So we will just keep going, and if Paul can just let us know anytime if he is there. I mean, I know he's there, but all right, so now's the chance to tell us about what came out of the CCLP. And I think, for all the people who are currently doing it, that's always the big question, isn't it? What's next? We've had these amazing experiences, but how do we bring it into our work and our lives in general? So if you could share some of the initiatives or the things you've been involved in, or things that were kickstarted by being a part of the CCLP, that would be great. Let's go with Emma first.
So my background's public health, and I'm not sure if many of you might remember Professor Simon Chapman, who, his thing was really tobacco control and advocacy, and he was a big advocate for public health, but he used a metaphor for good public health practice, and that was a cartoon that he had about being pecked to death by ducks. And while that doesn't sound like a particularly pleasant experience, the metaphor was really about having this multifaceted approach, and if this angle doesn't work, try another angle. And that, sometimes it wasn't necessarily about being strategic, it was just about being persistent. And so I think I have used more that approach in you know, in what's happened since. And I don't know that within that there's been grand successes, but I guess preparing for this has made me realise that there's been lots of small successes. So one of those is, as you heard, I've learnt how to do an acknowledgement to country in Wiradjuri language with both permission and support from elders in the community, and help to make sure that my pronunciation isn't too abysmal. I'm probably more confident to speak up if I'm uncomfortable about stereotypes that are represented in a conversation. I'm becoming more skillful to sort of interrupt that, but not in a way that is, you know, belittling or demeaning to the others that are there, but just in a way to sort of share, you know, that my experience of that has been different. And a small example would be yesterday I was in a meeting where the chair didn't do an acknowledgement of country, and that was absent, and previously I've just had been feeling uncomfortable about that, but I had found confidence to then, when it came around to me and it was my turn to speak, I just acknowledged where I was first, before I continued to you know, to contribute. I guess in my work, some of the things that I would do is to prioritise supporting Aboriginal colleagues, students and community first. And to give an example of that, writing for publication or applying for grants and that sort of thing, I would tend to privilege working with community on those things first before working with other academics, say. So that's sort of more labour on my part in some respects, but there's also far more learning and I think value for me as well. And other small things like doing what I can to make sure that opportunities provided by the uni are seen by people in the Aboriginal community. And a recent example would be circulating a job ad and, you know, helping people prepare an application. And I think the other thing, just being persistent and following things up to make sure that they happen or that they're discussed. And that might be things like arranging cultural tours for medical students who are on extended placements with us, or NAIDOC-inspired grand rounds at our local hospital, or inviting colleagues to join me at local NAIDOC activities and those sorts of things. And certainly encouraging other team members to undertake the CCLP, which there have been 2 colleagues who have done that in 2020. So that's probably some of the small wins.
Thanks, Emma. And, you know, it's so interesting, isn't it? Like you say, small wins, and earlier you said you're looking for the grand things, but it's the small wins that build the momentum and that we achieve things through. And small is often big in its impact and its effect. And it's about how we live, isn't it? And making it part of our everyday way of doing business at work and so on. And so they're small in one sense, but they're also not, you know what I mean? Like they're just,
yes, I do.
Yeah. It's
and also when, you know, just thinking about them all together, and this is obviously just a handful, you sort of go, oh, there's actually quite a bit happening, you know, yeah. There's a lot. And just that sense of, you know, encouragement or what have you from my workplace as well, you know, that makes it easy to, you know, to, I guess, move forward, you know, try new things, see whether it works or not, you know.
Exactly, and that trying is really important. And if everybody's doing these things and trying, then we get this groundswell of change. So thank you, Emma. So Antonia, how about you?
So what have we been able to implement at the library or do differently because of the CCLP? I think I first should say that I'm very fortunate to have had fantastic support from the leadership team here at the library, and many of the senior leadership team, in fact all now at the end of this year, will have undertaken the CCLP. So everybody in the leadership team is very much behind embedding cultural competence within the library, and there's been strong interest from other colleagues at various different levels, HEO levels within the library. So as a result of that, back in 2018, we created a library cultural competence community of practice, which is almost like the subset of the community of practice for the broader university. And it's really through the LCCC, as we're also known, that we've been able to implement a lot of great initiatives and roll out projects to foreground and improve cultural competence and embed culturally competent best practice within the library. We've also been fortunate enough to have applied for and received several tranches of Wingara Mirror funding through DVCISS that have allowed us to undertake some of the projects that we've done. And so back in 2018, one of the first major projects that we undertook was to host a seminar series, a multidisciplinary seminar series, for which the library is ideally positioned, of course, being a discipline neutral space. And the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander seminar series covered a range of topics from history and language to cultural astronomy, health, gender, art, and connection to country over a 6-month period. So there was one a month for 6 months, and that was a huge success. And we had many attendees and made a video series as a result, which was fantastic. Other things that we've done, there's been a consistent and concerted effort to give staff and students, clients at the library, opportunities to learn about cultural competence, and that's been done through a variety of mechanisms, including the 85% of the staff, I think, now have completed the career path modules. We've had or hosted film screenings, including for films such as The Australian Dream and In My Blood It Runs, followed by discussions. Like, for example, after The Australian Dream screening, the NCCC and Gabrielle hosted a racism discussion here at the library. We've invited staff to attend an Aboriginal meditation session. So there are a number of initiatives where staff have had learning opportunities. We also brought in Terry Janke, as you're aware, Terry Janke and Company have a particular expertise in Indigenous cultural intellectual property, and because of the library's cultural collections, that was of particular relevance to us. And we hosted a workshop on how we might be more aware of issues surrounding ICIP and how we might better manage collections in that respect. And then I guess our more recent major project has been the Advisor in Residence program, where we brought in a First Nations expert from the GLAM sector, a person called, a Wiradjuri man actually, called Nathan Sentence, who had worked at works at the Australian Museum and had worked at the State Library. And the project that he led in concert with the project team here at the library was to undertake a cultural audit of the library to understand what we were doing well, to conduct a gap analysis to understand where we could improve in respect of cultural competence, and then use the findings from that research to underpin the development of a comprehensive set of library protocols to embed culturally competent practice within the library. And these protocols are in their final draft now, and they cover everything from access to secret and sacred materials to collection development, how we might better foreground First Nations voices within the collection, contextualizing and offering alternate perspectives to outdated colonial views for materials that are housed within the collection, some materials, and particularly in our rare books, and special collections and legacy theses. And best practice for holding exhibitions and undertaking community engagement with our First Nation community. So that is a comprehensive piece of work that is just drawing to its conclusion. We're actually taking protocols to UEISS for final endorsement next week. And related to that, you know, one of the things that we've wanted to focus on is making the library a more culturally safe space. We gathered some survey data from incoming students in their first year of study who were coming to us to the university through the Gadigal program. And although their first impressions of the library were positive, one of the things that was noted is that it didn't particularly feel like a culturally safe space. And so this year, through partnership with DVCISS and some Wingara Mirror funding, we're actually just completing a digital placemaking project with an artist, a First Nations artist, who is preparing some video clips to be displayed in all of the library foyers as well as our think space, which will be a digital acknowledgement of country, but also contextualize the places on which the libraries stand in terms of the rich cultural history of these places and the country on which they stand. So we really look forward to being able to display those in the new year, but that project is just drawing to its conclusion. I could go on about some of our other projects and initiatives, but I think that provides a fairly comprehensive overview of what we've done in the last few years. And really all of these things have resulted from the Cultural Competence Leadership Program and the fact that, you know, a number of our colleagues in the library have attended it, and everybody's so engaged and so enthusiastic and wanting to actually translate our learnings into actionable programs and projects and initiatives that will enhance our cultural competence within the library space.
Thank you, Antonia. And there is just so much there, and it's such an inspiration just to hear about all that. And I think the other really great thing about what the library and that your approach right from the beginning was to form this community of practice. And so to bring people together, which was always the dream of the CCLP, that we were creating opportunities for people to come together and create change in their context, because you know your own context the best. So fantastic. We might come back and hear the rest of the changes later on, but let's go to Sarah now and just acknowledge that Paul is here, and I've just messaged him that we'll come back to him after Sarah talks.
That's a hard act to follow. I'm certainly not going to have anything like that I can say, but I also would echo what Emma said about it giving me the confidence to just speak up more, both the courage and also the language and a bit more insight into the approach that I could use in when I hear of things or see things being done that I would like to give people more information about. There's been times when there hasn't been an acknowledgement of country that I would quietly mention to somebody conducting the event that it would be nice to do that. And also in broader terms, there's other leadership programs that I've participated in where if I see that there's no consideration, they might do an acknowledgement, but then not enough consideration to given to Indigenous perspectives more generally, I've felt emboldened to give that feedback. And so I just look for opportunities to share knowledge and information that I have in as appropriate and humble a way as I can, knowing that I don't know anywhere near enough, but that maybe I can make a difference in bringing things to people's attention as a result of having had that experience. And the other thing I was going to say on a more personal level is it did help me to think about my own kind of values in a way and how they relate to the sort of colonialist, capitalist situation that I grew up in, and the stark contrast with Aboriginal ways and cultures and the relational learning, the kinship model, things, even in terms of what leadership means and looks like for me at work. A lot of the things I had valued and felt were good were articulated very well in the things that resonated with me from the weekend. And so it helped me feel a little bit more confident, I suppose, in continuing to try and better myself in that area and take the things from Aboriginal culture that resonated with me and my own values. And when I say take, I don't mean take from them. I just mean the influences that were there that I found really special and valuable, that helped me to think about the way I see the world and whether I do want it to be the way that it has always been or the way I've been taught, or whether there are things that resonate more with me that I think I could do differently or more of. So the way I lead my team, for example, I've never been really fond of a hierarchy, and I've always liked listening to people and hearing what their perspective is. And so there were elements of that I felt strengthened my approach. If that makes sense.
Perfect sense. Thank you so much. Paul, welcome. Let's just catch up with everybody who you are. So Paul Donnelly is the Deputy Director of the Chau Chak Wing Museum, that beautiful new space. If you haven't gone to see it yet, please do. So Paul, could you just tell us a little bit about your journey with the CCLP, what drew you to it, and what did you get out of it? What's the thing that stayed with you?
So I think coming from the museum, Chau Chak Wing Museum, such amazing cultural collections from many Indigenous communities, it seemed like the right thing to do, and I was interested in learning more about the living cultures rather than some of the more early material that we had. So I went to UN Country in 2018. It was actually before, in preparing for this, aside from trying to get into the meeting, I had looked at my photographs that I'd taken, and I really had found I've always been into natural history. I love birds, but engaging with the natural life, the wildlife around there at that time just seemed to be all the more magnified in terms of its significance and the relevance of everything I saw to the living Indigenous culture. And like Antonia, when Antonia was talking, I didn't see the whale. I didn't quite have that level of additional experience. But I found that to be one of the most profound experiences I've had in a long time. To be sitting on that rock platform, closing your eyes, listening, hearing the Red Bay community talking about that actually what we're listening to there is the continuation of millennia past, was really a really amazing thing for me to hear. And something I keep practicing too. If I hear the screech of a cockatoo, even when you're walking on, Gadigal land here at Sydney University, it means something different to me now that I've been through that experience.
Wow, that's so profound. Thank you for sharing that. And just in terms of how you were able to bring it back into your work, what are some of the things that you've been able to do or that have been inspired by participating in the CCLP?
We in the University Museum here, we have got a number of Indigenous exhibitions, and they were already in development, thoroughly in development by the time I came here. We have our Indigenous curator, Matt Cole. We have staff here who are already extremely culturally competent. So I felt like my experience down the coast on Yuin country was kind of at least bringing me a little bit more up to what was already the profound things that were already happening here in the museum. And I think that as a deputy director, it certainly made me more attuned to the kinds of cultural issues and the desires that my colleagues wanted to achieve. And in terms of bringing down, say, Yolngu community elders to talk to our designers and to talk to our curators, in terms of collaborating in a really authentic way, those exhibitions, in terms of making sure that we have the budget and being totally supportive of any kind of collaboration that we had. I think having been through the CCLP helped me to really never question the validity and the importance of doing those kind of things. So while I can't lay any claims to personal outcomes, I do like to think that my experience in the CCLP certainly made me a strong supporter of all the great initiatives that my other colleagues had.
Thank you. And so we've heard from all of you about the different range of initiatives. What have been some of the obstacles or, maybe a little bit of resistance that you might have met, or have you, along the way? And what have you done to overcome these challenges, perhaps? Let's start with you, Sarah.
I think that some of the challenges have been people's workload and their sense of prioritisation. I think, as I said earlier, some people think it's kind of a nice to have rather than a really essential part of what we do. And one of the things that helped me with being on the program was being able to centre that those initiatives and centre the things that I want to do and not feel like it's interfering with other work, but that it is actually just as important, if not more so, and to be able to do that. But I still think not everyone has that same view. So I don't think there's many people who would, or many of my colleagues certainly, who would disagree that that Indigenous, sharing Indigenous knowledge and that cultural competency is important. It's more just where does it fall on their hierarchy of things that they are prepared to give time to in the context of all of the other things I have to do. So that's one thing. And then another thing is that trying to figure out how to approach or call out people when what they're doing is unintentional and they may feel embarrassed if you were to approach them in a certain way and try and gently encourage them to change their approach. So yeah, I don't think there's a lot of, I think that the intentions are sort of irrelevant when it comes to that, because it comes down to what's the impact and how do you approach that when it is colleagues or senior people that are doing things that are not quite right. So they're probably some of the challenges.
Thank you. Emma.
So I guess rather than start with the challenges, in my workplace, there's always been a feeling of we'd like to do more and we know we can do better, but we just don't know how to get started. And so I think that even before I attended the CCLP, there's really been support for my ideas and encouragement within my workplace. And this had enabled me to respond to requests from the Aboriginal communities, such as we want you to teach doctors how to yarn, or we want to build a relationship with your students, but outside the hospital environment, can we have a campfire yarn up? Or at their request, arranging a guest First Nations lecturer from Canada to talk about trauma-informed care. So, those sorts of things, have been encouraged and supported. But I think that there's general resistance to the idea that racism is alive and well, and that some of our processes at the universities perpetuate this. I think as individuals, we don't feel racist because we don't have like an outrageous fear or hatred of other people, and none of us are a chance of kneeling on anyone's neck until they die. But at the same time, we don't question, some of our other processes, such as we don't question that we pay a doctor to teach a class, but we expect an elder to teach that same class for free. At exam time, we happily pay patients with complex health problems to come in and be examined by students. But there's endless complications I have found in paying elders or community members who are part of advisory committees, even when they're externally funded. We invite elders to attend events, but we do that electronically, even though we know that and many elders don't have email addresses or internet access to, to register or sign up for the various events. We make scholarships available for Aboriginal students which cover such a small part of attending university that it's either not possible at all, or it's just a cause of ongoing financial stress for that student for their entire candidature. And yet when this is raised, and this is a real example, the response was, I don't know why the student's complaining, they get more than most. And I think the other thing, we invite academic rigour in our work, which means holding these things up to critique. But what I've seen is that when an Aboriginal patient or community member make a clear request and reasonable request or suggestion, that this is somehow seen as abrasive and the conversation's shut down. So I guess these are sort of examples about what I mean about being an ally and walking with, and trying to hold these differences up for questioning and examination to see if they're fair and just, and agitating for change if we need to. And I guess in that way, trying to encourage that we respond to these, we're open to responding to these requests, open to considering these requests without being defensive or fragile.
Thank you. That was a bit of a sigh at the end there for you. Thank you, and thank you for bringing up, you know, some very real and everyday experiences and challenges that do come up, and how the system can work against their efforts in this space. So thank you, Emma. Antonia.
Sorry, I had myself on mute there. I think I might echo Sarah in saying that perhaps one of our main challenges in increasing cultural competence and undertaking the programs and projects that we have is that people have been doing this in addition to their usual work-related duties. And so progress, although we've achieved an incredible amount, progress has sometimes been slower than I would have liked, and there's always more that we can do. But if that's been our major challenge, I think what we have been very fortunate in is that we have had a number of colleagues undertake the CCLP, and we have, with the support of the library senior leadership team, been able to progress the work that we've done through the Library Cultural Competence Community of Practice. So to turn the question on its head somewhat, I guess the things that have worked for us and have made what we've achieved possible is having the community of practice and a group of willing and enthusiastic people who want to be involved in the project work that we're doing, and want to see improvements to people's awareness of cultural competence and cultural best practice. And as I mentioned earlier, we've also been fortunate on 3 occasions to have received Wingara Mirror funding. You know, just to mention to people who are watching the session today that, you know, that this has been made available through the application for the grants, the funding compacts through DVCISS on an annual basis. And I would encourage, if you do have projects that you want to roll out, that there really is, that presents a good opportunity to be able to resource those projects in the way that you need to. The other thing that we found really useful is to frame our initiatives as projects and to have, you know, proper project plan, scoping, project plan, milestones, etc. So we're actually working towards certain goals and along a certain timeline, a particular timeline. That has been really helpful to progressing the work that we've done. And I think if you approach your initiatives and ideas in that way, you generally have a greater opportunity to succeed.
Thank you so much. And just for those listening, the Wingara Mirror Compact funding we talked about on Monday in our session, and we can talk about it again on Friday. But we committed to it. Expressions of interest are called early in the new year, so we'll make sure that the notice or expression of interest call for, you know, things gets sent out to everybody when it comes out. So thanks for that, Antonia. And Paul.
I've been really pleased with what I thought could be challenges have turned out to be not able to be overcome. We've been really, even with COVID, for example, we weren't able to have any of the Indigenous communities come down to the opening for the museum for obvious reasons. But thanks to partly Wingara Mirror funding, we have got a January event happening, which is remotely organised with Yolngu communities. We provided them funding in order to have filming of their communities, which can be shown here. We can show them what's happening here with live streaming. So a really complex outcome, which could only happen with really sincere kinds of desires to make these kinds of things happen. Another example is we've had many smoking ceremonies associated with the museum in the last 6 or 7 months, and that includes smoking all of our storage areas, our old storage areas, our old museums, and then the new museum as a building, and then the new museum with the exhibition museum. And in the museum world, turning off the fire alarms is tantamount to almost professional suicide. But there's never been any issues with the importance of carrying out those activities, despite the inherent problems of the world. So I've been very happy with that.
That's great. Yeah, I can imagine it would be a bit challenging, but how great that cultural practice has become not, you know, everyday practice, and it's now not even questioned. So great to hear that. Thank you. So we've got a few minutes left. There aren't any questions that I can see in the chat. So if there are any burning questions out there, please put them in. But my question to all of you now is, you know, what's your advice to the colleagues doing CCLP this year? What could be their first step as we finish up this week, having done the program? What's your best bit of advice for them? Sarah, let's start with you.
Yeah, so I think keeping in touch with other people that have been on the program is good, but I think you don't have to worry and beat yourself up about if you don't go to everything, you can't go to any, because I've found that everyone's very understanding of time commitment. So I think sometimes people can get put off and they think, oh, I haven't done that for a while, I'll stay away. But I've found just do what you can when you can, because don't let perfect be the enemy of good. And I think that applies to anything we do in this space. Of course, you want to do your best, but it's a real shame when I see people saying, oh, I feel bad, I haven't done anything at all. So they just keep not doing anything at all instead of just whatever you can. Also, I think seek out Indigenous perspectives in the way of media. For me, that's been really important, particularly on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook and social media, so that I'm constantly hearing from a range of Indigenous voices and reading about Indigenous news outside of the university and my own circle. I think for me that's been really important and a great way of keeping that top of mind. Even things like, you know, supporting Indigenous causes and work, like again through social media, I try and, you know, think about things like the Indigenous Literacy Foundation, looking for Indigenous artists and collaborators, you know, buying gifts from the markets, clothing, music, books, just all of that. I think having done the course and figuring out, I'm in a process of figuring out how to do that in a way that's not appropriation, but is respectful. You know, the more information you get and the more you listen to Indigenous people, the more you understand what is okay and what isn't. There's a clothing label that has mob-friendly and ally-friendly clothes. So if you go to that website, you know what pieces of items are fine for you to wear versus more for Aboriginal people. So I think before it, like obviously I had an interest in going to the CCLP, but it became more tangible in terms of going from an idea that I had and just my behaviour towards other people in everyday life, and more proactively doing these kinds of things that I'm saying in small little ways that actually all contribute to having that better perspective and keeping that going in my work life as well.
Thank you, Sarah. Paul.
I think what was really special for me ultimately, but I think that going into the course, doing these, I mean, I was a British migrant at 18, a very melancholy place. Your kind of
sorry, Paul, sorry to interrupt you, but you're cutting in and out a little bit. Maybe can you lean in a bit to the microphone or something? It's just not that clear.
You hear me now? Wow, I'm doing really well today, aren't I?
I know, I'm sorry, but I thought I was better to say something than let you go.
Okay, I was going to say, I would hope that other people would get from completing the program a similar kind of outcome that I got, which was, having migrated at the age of 18, I have constantly seen the land with a melancholy kind of overlay. I saw it through a colonial lens. And the CCLP has really helped me to see the groups, the different landscapes as still having those ongoing living ownerships as being very much still there today. And I'm looking forward to times when we move from place to place, we will know the original, the ongoing nationalities, the ongoing nation names for those areas, and they become more part of our day-to-day language. I think that's already starting to happen, but I want to see road signs along the roads and saying you are now in Waratiri land and Darwin land, etc. And I think that the more people who do the NCCLP, the more opportunity there is for these kinds of outcomes to happen.
Thank you. I can't unmute myself now. Thanks for that. Antonia.
In terms of advice and next steps, I think one thing to keep in mind from the CCLP, whilst we learned a lot, that cultural competence is a journey, and you're not going to know everything on completing the program, and we're all still learning, and we will make mistakes, and we can take, we'll take small steps initially, and with the support of colleagues, we might be able to deliver on some bigger objectives over time, but it is a process. And it's an ongoing process too. It's not a project that you can start and finish, really. It's lifelong. But in order to succeed on bigger initiatives in an environment like the university, which can be complex to navigate, my recommendation would be, if possible, try not to do it alone. Gather a group of like-minded colleagues and try and set up, objectives and goals and work on initiatives together, because you'll succeed and achieve so much more in doing that. Even just, the initiation of projects, the ideation process is so much more effective where you've got multiple minds contributing rather than just relying on yourself. And even at that early stage of any initiative or project, the other thing I would say that it's really important to engage with First Nations staff and community. Any process on embedding cultural competence or delivering cultural competence related projects needs to be collaborative. And it's too late to consult once decisions have already been made or ideas have been locked in, because then that's really just asking for approval rather than truly consulting. So engage and consult early if you can, and try and integrate First Nations colleagues and community into the project process if possible too. And then, of course, as I mentioned earlier, the process becomes much easier if you have a proper project plan. Set up a scope and project plan and timeline and try and work towards that. And even despite the fact that everybody's doing this on a voluntary basis on top of their day jobs, you'll find that the projects can be delivered in a far more successful and predictable manner if you are working to a scope and a timeline.
Thank you, and we look forward to the day when it is actually part of their day job and not on top. And Emma, over to you.
I apologise, my little white fluffy dog is deciding that now's the time to have an objection to something that's happening. I think in addition to the advice that's been given by the others, I'd say start with yourself and build your network, and network meaning with community and with peers. If you're invited to an elders group, go meet people, build your own network that's relevant to your own, I guess, community. And, because this is not just about work. Cultural competence isn't just about what happens, when you clock on and clock off. It's about what happens all of the time. And make that genuine to your own interest as well. So if your own interest is art, then make it through art. But if your own interest is football, then make it through, go to the knockout. Just, it doesn't matter if you're the only white person there, that's fine. That just, go along and start building your own network. And I think the other things I would say is go gently. Like, this is a long game, and you need to be kind to yourself and make sure that you're safe. And there's been plenty of well-intentioned people who've gone before you, and others have seen them come and go and burn out. So I'd say just go gently and be an ally. Respond to what your Aboriginal peers and colleagues and community are sharing with you, and suggesting that you take up. Because when you know that you've got them behind you, it really gives you a lot more momentum and conviction.
Thank you. And go gently is a really nice way to end it. So thank you all very much. We are at time now. I'm so grateful to you for coming on and sharing your experiences with the CCLP with our colleagues. And thank you so much for giving us your time. And thank you to everybody who tuned in today. And I'll see some of you on Friday, and the rest of you will be in touch. Thank you all very much. See you.